Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Well, I kind of want to touch basis on the L.B.L. again. It definitely is a very interesting place. So far, I've shared Bigfoot encounters, Dogman encounters, a little bit of history, and some of the more famous landmarks, like the California Hotel or the Vampire Hotel. Well, there is more to that place than meets the eye. Before we get into today's upload, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch store to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook version. They were written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. They're available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. And the links to them are in the description as well. Now, everyone, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload, shall we? Now, as we've all discussed, the L.B.L. has multiple accounts of Dogman. Many encounters have been added on, speculated, yada yada. There's the family of 4 that were brutally slain in the 80s. Then there was the bow hunter in the 90s. There was Jan Thompson, I believe her last name is, who reported on a family encounter that she had, I believe in the 70s, with her cousins. Her male cousin was on a dirt bike and a dogman chased him through the woods all the way to their home, and the kids all hid inside as this creature attacked the side of the house, finally stopping only when the parents got home or the mom got home. Many Bigfoot encounters or sightings. So it's pretty intense out there with these cryptids. Then there's the stories of the Vampire Hotel, the California Hotel, the bunkers that no longer exist out there, even though some people will say they do on their shows. But according to Tim Baker, who is Coonbo, as you guys know, they don't. And they weren't designed to hunt a dogman or the beast of L.B.L. They were used for, I believe, training excursions. Maybe not even that, but, speculation and the rumor mill has, made it almost word, One person makes a rumor up, and the next time another person, adds on to it. We've all seen it in high school, and unfortunately it happens in this community. So there's a ton of cemeteries out there. But not only is there creatures and just a bunch of weird stuff, there's a lot of paranormal activity out there. And that is what we're going to discuss today. In small towns, stories spread like wildfire, and when those stories carry a wicked or spooky twist, it's not shocking that those creepy tales become legend. Our corner of the world is no different. We'll like to think of our little slice of paradise with the Native American Civil War history of the region, not to mention the unpopular relocation of many residents during the creation of the land between the lakes. It's no surprise that a few eyebrow-raising stories have been spun. If you add these historic events to the legend of the Beast of L.B.L., the Phantom Trucker, the Vampire Hotel, and countless cemeteries tucked in the hills of the L.B.L., it becomes a haven for the creepy and weird. In a recent conversation, several stories were told to create a buzz to investigate these unexplained things more thoroughly. First account is one that can be easily explained if our source was not so convincing in its telling. In the summer of 2009, a friend was traveling on a country road late at night to her parents' house when a light began to follow her. It looked just like a motorcycle light, she recalls. One second it would be right behind my car, almost on my bumper. Another second it would be a mile back. Then it would be on my bumper again and simply disappear. The phenomenon continued for about 10 miles before our source was able to receive a cell phone signal and call her dad, who agreed to meet her in the yard with his gun. As I rounded the curve to my parents' house, the light was right behind my car. I was scared whoever or whatever it was would follow me into the driveway. But when I pulled into the yard and looked, nothing was there. It was dead silence. The story didn't take place in L.B.L, but certainly sets the scene for what happened a few months later in October of 2009. The same source and her friend was traveling on 6880 late one evening heading west. About midway through the park, an eerie similar light appeared, as did the overwhelming sense of urgency to get out of the L.B.L. I didn't want to say anything because no one except my dad believed me the first time. I also knew if she freaked out, I would too. But she sensed my fear and asked what was wrong with me, so I told her. But it was so strange, as soon as we crossed the bridge, the creepy feeling I experienced disappeared, as well as the light. While our source's friend claims to have only seen the light on straight stretches, indicating the car's lights had disappeared when the two girls were going around a curve, the source is adamant about the lights being otherworldly. Further testament to her story, the next day I went to work and was still a little unnerved about what had happened. I began to tell a coworker about the strangest thing that happened to me in the L.B.L. when he interrupted me and asked, "Did a strange light follow you?" When I confirmed my response with our story, he looked at me with a very grave look on his face. "It's the Phantom Trucker. I've seen it too." While the stories of the Phantom Trucker seem to differ between being focused on 6880 and the trace, the premise is the same. A truck driver was allegedly killed in an accident, and now his ghostly truck follows patrons through the land between the lakes at night, but disappears before leaving the park. Have you seen those lights? The second story comes from a very trustworthy source, a man familiar with the area and its folklore. Having disregarded all of the scary stories, he had camped in the area many times and was unconcerned with what might be hiding out in the shadows. On this particular night, his opinion changed. He and his friends decided to camp on the northeast side of the L.B.L, on the bank of Lake Barclay. He and his wife pitched their tent up on a hill while his friends made camp on the shore about 30 feet below. As night fell and darkness came over the campground, our source began to feel an overwhelming sense of dread and urgency to move his tent. He described this experience as though someone was watching him, or at least he wasn't alone. A very sensible and logical man, he couldn't shake the feeling of fright and found it absolutely necessary to relocate his makeshift dwelling. Some may brush these feelings off as par for the course while backcountry camping. After all, being completely outside of your element can put anyone on edge. But the stories don't end with this one. Our source tells us that his friends returned to the same location sometime later, built a campfire. These are good, God-fearing, church-going people. I don't think they'd be scared about this story if they didn't fully believe what had happened was real, he says. During this campfire, all three at once became overwhelmed with a very sinister sensation. One began to cry. The others turned to look in the darkness and saw a face peering back at them. As quickly as they could, they left the area and never went back. After hearing these stories, it only made sense that we investigate the claims, and after discussing our opinions and options, we decided that we return to the haunted location and spend the night. Prior to our excursion, we did a little research on what we may find during our upcoming night at the park. Well known to those who frequent the area are stories of the beast of the L.B.L. Everyone seems to know someone who knows someone who has seen it, but first-hand accounts seem to be scarce. As far back as Native American settlers, tales have been told of a wolf-like Dogman creature that walks on two legs, Legend has it that this ferocious creature would terrorize farm animals and leave them annihilated in barnyards as terrified farmers watched from behind their curtains. There's also a sad story circulating that in the 80s a whole family of campers was violently eaten at the campground, but the government and the powers that be supposedly chose not to tell the story for fear it would ruin the upcoming tourist season. Stories such as these seem to riddle every tourist-based town and appear to be told simply as fodder for scaring vacationers unfamiliar with the truth. Regardless whether or not the beast exists, the stories are enough to make your hair stand on end and question howls in the night. The land between the lake area also contains an abandoned structure known as Vampire Hotel, which many believe was a meeting ground of the Murray, Kentucky-based vampire clan, which was led by Roderick Farrell. Farrell claimed to be a 500-year-old vampire called Vesigo, and murdered a couple in Florida before being captured and sent to prison. While we believe the association of Farrell and the Vampire Hotel is just rumor, it still adds a macabre undertone to the history of the grounds. Being an area uninhabited by humans, the land between the lakes is obviously home to creepy noises and red eyes in the dark. While these can be explained away by numerous animals that dwell in the forest, some say the L.B.L. is also home to strange omens and the paranormal. It is said that if you see a group of white-tailed deer, you should go the opposite direction, as they are warning you of danger. Some Civil War soldiers haunt these grounds, as do former slaves who are angry about the injustice dealt to them. Other tell tales of those whose graves were flooded in effort to make the two Great Lakes. They say this unkind history has bred a negative energy that lurks within the woods. Knowing we may experience the unexplained, we set out at night joking that we hoped we would not be eaten by bear. Bear do not inhabit this area deep down. We all hoped ghosts didn't either. Our source for disturbing camping stories led us directly to the location of their campsite. Upon entering the area, things seemed to be positively normal. Birds were singing, the breeze was blowing, the sun was reflecting off the little inlet in front of us. One would say this was a perfect location for night outdoors. After our guide retold his particular story and left us in the woods, we set up camp and began to explore. We ventured into the area that is normally covered with several feet of water, but was settling into a winter pool. We found the dirt surface with animal tracks and footprints. Since it had been a while since we had any precipitation, the footprints had almost turned to concrete in the mud. Then we saw the biggest footprint we'd ever seen. As someone with large feet, I'd say this print was huge. It was several inches longer than my own foot, and had a large big toe that just jutted out to the side. Was this a prank previous campers had created, leaving an eerie print in the mud, or is a Sasquatch alive and well in the L.B.L.? Next, we went in search of a cemetery that supposedly to be at the top of the nearby hill, or, as I would like to call it, a mountain. It was, without a doubt, the steepest hill I've ever climbed. I was hoping a ghost would be hanging out waiting for us when we got there, just for all the effort. But we never located that cemetery. All we found were remains of an old home place, but it left a little to be concerned about. We did hear a strange buzzing noise that stopped us in our tracks, but a friend pointed out the strange noise was mosquitoes, and they were flying above us. Looking up in the sky, we saw bats around eating the dear insect friends. I admit, hearing an unidentified noise on a ghost hunt was a bit uncomfortable. It seems the mind can create whatever it wants when your adrenaline is pumping. The sun began to set on us as we made our way back down the steep embankment with the canopy of trees thickening and night falling. It was nearly dark by the time we reached the bottom of the hill. One of the girls in the group pointed into the woods and said, "Is that a chair?" Another group member stepped off the path into the woods to investigate what appeared to be a pop-up camping chair, hiding in the shadows overlooking the lake. Seconds later, we heard, "Guys, don't move, stay right where you are." We huddled together, all thinking what he was thinking. He had just found a dead body. He crept closer. We huddled closer, whispering amongst ourselves. With our campsite within sight, my first reaction was thinking I'd have to come back the next day for my tent, because there's no way I'm spending a second in the woods where a dead body had been. The moments were tense, and we waited. Suddenly, our friend began to laugh. At first, we thought he'd been playing a joke on us, but it turns out he had really been as scared as we were. Only instead of finding a corpse he thought he saw, he found a camping chair that had been modified into a porta-toilet. Previous campers had left us their gift. We all laughed at the absurdity of what our imaginations had produced, and our own ability to scare ourselves silly. Night came without incident. We made s'mores, talked about life, stoked the fire. Occasional strange noises would cause us to shine the flashlight into the darkness, but no ghosts ever materialized to identify themselves. At one point, members of the party began to discuss a possible trip to other strange locations within the L.B.L, but not everyone was comfortable with that idea. So we remained around the fire, hoping, or not hoping, something scary would happen. At around 1 in the morning, the dogs we brought began to act funny. One began to bark and growl, and the other sat by my side, ears perked up, looking into the woods to our right. She sat completely still, her chest trembling. Her uneasiness made me uneasy. The dogs calmed down after a few minutes, and I began to snap pictures into the darkness around us. Nothing showed up on the camera at sight, but further investigation, looking at the negatives, revealed several orbs within the view. Some may say orbs were merely dust or bugs, but I present the following argument. It was incredibly dusty that evening. It hadn't rained for quite some time, and everything had a dirty film across it. If it was so dusty, then why did each snapshot have 1 to 5 orbs in it? Shouldn't there be millions? As for bugs, these photos were snapped late at night, on a night when it's very cold, temperatures bordering freezing. I don't recall ever swatting a bug away from me, and in the photos in question, they are all centralized in one location, not flying around in random spots like bugs would. I find the whole thing questionable. Would a professional ghost hunter debunk this? They could, I believe. Given the elements in nature, the light, there is no logical way to explain the lack of dust particles and the cluster of orbs in my photographs. Finally, the time for us to go to bed came. We agreed it was far too cold for ghosts to be out anyway. As the campers got quiet, a coworker and I listened to the night. Every few minutes, we'd nudge each other and whisper, "What was that?" It almost became funny at the time. Past a buck rubbing its antlers on a tree, a bobcat crying in the night, a hawk, a coyote. We identified the unknown noises, and then one would say, "I'm glad we identified that sound. Even the strangest noise seemed comforting when you could identify what was making it. That is, until we heard a pterodactyl. Until the day I die, I will insist that the spine-chilling scream/roar we heard was a dinosaur and not something otherworldly. You may now commence spreading the legend of the pterodactyl of the L.B.L. The night began to fade to dawn, and we were resting soundly in our tent, knowing we had made it through the night without being scared to death by something supernatural. There's a peaceful calm on Lake Barclay. The sun began to rise, and with snores of friends filling the air, I achieved what normally eludes me while camping: deep sleep. Then the strangest thing happened. The ground trembled and something thundered past our tent through our campsite. We all jolted awake from our false sense of security. I ended up in a tornado drill position with my hands over my head, thinking we were going to die. We were all breathless, blinking at each other in the morning. All said and done, I wish I had been braver on the camping trip and really investigated the paranormal claims between the land between the lakes, but that's easy to say now that I'm not out in the woods. Was our campsite haunted? I honestly don't know, having camped in the land between the lakes over a dozen times. I have to say it's a wonderful place. I've never felt scared or threatened. Sure, there are noises that are unexplained, but I don't think evil looters behind every tree. I do believe, however, with such rich history, anything is possible, and if something paranormal is there and wants to be seen, it will let us know. But some things simply don't need to be stirred up. What rests beyond the woods in the dark shadows is anyone's guess, but if you go looking for it, you may find something you don't want to find, or it may find you. So, reading that article, I kind of got a couple of things that just popped into my head that I've thought over time. That the L.B.L. is obviously very rich with history. The Native American lore of the wolf shapeshifter, the slaves, and the Civil War soldiers who died in the area. And, like said in the article, but not in such detail as I'm going to give right now, slavery and those slaves who escaped were pissed. They're pissed and had every right to be, and vengeful and angry, and died out there, probably alone, cold, hungry, hurt, sad, pissed, and a vengeful spirit may have been produced, or many, Civil War soldiers dying, young men. The orbs were mentioned. Of course, then the L.B.L, beast of the L.B.L, is mentioned. Donald Coleman Jr., who lives out that way on Lake Barclay, he has mentioned reptilians, as well as Dogman, Bigfoot, the cemeteries. For some reason, like Skinwalker Ranch, I really have a sneaky feeling that there are some portals in the L.B.L, and I think it's rich with them. And because, just like Skinwalker Ranch, you've got paranormal, you've got ghost sightings, you've got cryptid sightings, you've got UFO sightings, you've got orb sightings, you've got this sighting and that sighting. Same as the L.B.L. So, is it rich with these portals and creepy history and vengeful ghosts of slaves, Native Americans, Civil War soldiers? People have been murdered out there, not just the people that were attacked by the L.B.L beast, but people who were just murdered out there in general. Something really, I don't know. The place has something, and it has something that's very, very scary, but it's kind of hard to, you look at pictures of the L.B.L, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And I'm, looking forward to going there and a couple other places. But when you're there, you're looking at this beautiful scenery, but you've got to always have in the back of your mind all of the things, ghosts. I hate the word ghosts. Paranormal specters, or whatever the hell you want to call them. Who knows? Maybe even out of these portals, demons are coming. There's been accounts that people have said they've seen demons that look like dogmen. We really don't know until the scientific proof is right there in the pudding. So, I don't know. With that, guys, I want to thank you for listening to another little L.B.L history kind of research, discovery, whatever you want to call it. I just wanted to share something neat with you guys, and I really love the channel. I love you guys, and whenever I come across something neat, I really think I feel like I've got to share it with you. So, all right, have a great day, and I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. And with that, I'm going to bid you farewell, and see ya!